the divine word that was and is embodied in Christ, Antichrist figure, is one of transfiguration, Antichrist figure, is one of transfiguration, and ultimately transmutation. This is dually true for both the Antichrist and the Christ, for one aspect of infinity to be transfigured, another must be disfigured, and for one that is disfigured, transfigured, the transfigured must be disfigured. Believe it or not, the deciding factors of when it was used properly and when it was not the right instance for the word, audience, and dynamic context that the audience understands the word in. So to cover all my bases, and so we are all on the same page, let me start off by defining the subject of the content. And for good measure, I will throw in another interesting word that is simulation. Transubstantiation. In fact, I will start with that. Transubstantiation is seemingly impossible, or rather, a word that describes a state of impossibility, or at least a state that is not high in probability, and that is that something can change from one entirely different nature without changing any aspect of its empirical and observable form, and generally that is something that a snake oil salesman would sell, or in our context, the Catholic Church. Transubstantiation is from the Latin to cross, and substantiation is a direction, a trend, a pattern, the substance of. So it is to oppose the substance of a thing, thus altering it on a fundamental level. Whereas transfiguration does not fundamentally oppose one's nature, but may very well exalt, may very well disguise one's true nature under a superficial charm or radiance, a inflated stature or poise. Transmutation, in a sense, is the genus of the speciation of change. So the speciation being transfiguration or transubstantiation. Or vice versa. A chimpanzee into a salamander might also be considered a transmutation, but more likely to be considered a miracle and have people looking for Jesus as somehow a culprit. Now, transfiguration, this is generally a superficial form of transmutation because it has to do with the empirical nature of a thing, or empirical form of a thing, the external, not so much what the nature or identity of this thing is. Such as in the Bible, when Jesus was transfigured on the Mount, he was still, he was still subject to mortality. But for an instant, he was transfigured in the likeness of his divinity. Transfiguration does not change the nature of an action, as I said before, so much as how the action is perceived, the language, and the language, by language, I mean symbols. That's what language is a collection of symbols that we use to think, write, and communicate with. Jesus chose to use certain mannerisms and speeches and the dissemination of his message, and can be considered a mechanism of transmutation, because while his message is straightforward and not really subject to interpretation, so much as let me show you, be perfect as I am, and so forth and so on. The significance of his meaning, or the meaning behind the meaning, was veiled behind the lens of the listener. Every person is at a different stage in their initiation into the divine transcendence, and the meaning behind that meaning, the message, is going to speak to each one of us differently. Because ultimately his message was meant to be the truth, the one truth, and that was true, or sounds, or resonates as true to everyone that hears it in its entirety, as without anybody adding or taking away from it. Unfortunately, that message is hard to really grasp unless you have an attention span above average and your interest is adequately piqued to follow up, to stir you in that direction. I am not here to tell you the one truth. That was Jesus' job. That is what Jesus did. I am here to tell you how that truth resounds with me in my own personal journey of initiation to deeper understanding of self and meaningful pursuit. And I hope that for those that are not also coming to this realization on their own, that it is not completely disregarded as harmful. It piques your interests and encourages you to explore. Primarily, I will be focusing on these actions of Jesus, what Jesus did, or rather, what he did and didn't do. But also, I will be touching on a few things that he actually said, such as, to start with, the Beatitudes of Jesus, his Sermon on the Mount. In their entirety, the Beatitudes are a description of a transmutation that will occur, or is a transmutation. I don't consider it transfiguration because I'm blessed, and its antonym are subjective in regards to higher and lower. After all, it reigns on both good and evil, indiscriminately. Man and beast and plants and inanimate matter also indiscriminately. It does not discriminate. But it is a transmutation. It is definitely a changing of the essential state of the thing. What? Yes, Lord. Lay down.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for what is right, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted in the cause of right, for theirs is the kingdom. Blessed are you when people abuse you and persecute you and speak all kinds of calumny against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven, as it was for the prophets persecuted before you. In your prayers, remember, your Father knows what your needs are before you ask Him. This is how you should pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
The kingdom of God is within you, not without you. But there's a superposition aspect of you. Even every light casts a shadow. There's an instruction manual. If you're sad, retreat, introvert, indwell, because you'll leave the sadness outside of you, and you'll find the stuff to be thankful for and happy for inside, and you'll rejoice with what's inside of you. What's your consciousness? An aspiration of divinity. that which is already divine, aspiring to be divine, because it is your consciousness that your divinity needs to see itself. I think it's generally regarded as a spirit is within you, but in this case it's not, because in the other places in the Bible it refers to the Spirit of God descending upon you, not within you. But in that situation, that scenario, and introversion would put the Spirit of God within you, and maybe it's in your spirit in that sense, but basically your consciousness. I think your spirit of God and your spirit is a spirit that lies within the spirit, basically the meaning behind the meaning. And I would think that autonomic nervous system and its processing regions of the origin and the divine spirit would be a conscious aspiration to be perfect or to be divine, to tap that spiritual essence. And that is an aspiration that can only be found in the conscious mind. The spiritual experience can be effective outside conscious mind, but the aspiration for that experience is always a conscious thing. And generally, I would say a conscious thing, at least for introverts, because I am an introvert, is acquired consciously by an indwelling. Not an indwelling, I'm out of dwelling. I'm trying to manifest my ego or appease my ego, which is external. That is when I'm not looking for or aspiring for my divinity, inspiring for my tyranny. That would be, to better put it, that is when I am aspiring to cause the effect of divinity, not to be divine. As when I am indwelling, I'm aspiring to be divinity, or to be divine. When I'm dwelling externally, or trying to manifest myself, I am aspiring to effect divinity, to effect that which is divine. Now, let me go back. Now, this takes me to a crossroads in this revelation, to where it gets all too real, all too quick. And it's because divinity and tyrant meet right there in the middle, and your primal man gets to stand face to face with its maker, or its drawer. For God drew us forth, Jesus drew us forth, and we're here. The reptilians are here to meet their maker. So the Eucharist comes from the time that Jesus is preaching to all of his thousands of people, and he said to them, he had so many followers, he had thousands of people to follow him around everywhere to hear what he had to say. And one day he said some fucking whack ass, fucking off the wall shit in their minds, because cannibalism is fucking inherently repulsive. Not in the sense that they're grossed out by it per se, but they're terrified by it. It repulses our instincts, because who wants to think the guy that sitting next to them could fucking be their fucking worst nightmare, taking out fucking butcher knife, start butchering you and eat you right there. But Jesus said, unless you drink of my blood and eat of my flesh, you have no part with me. This statement was a bold statement, and had a dual purpose. That was, as I said, for transmutation and transfiguration. The transfiguration is that he transfigures the word, or transfigures the world. The word doesn't change, or the world, he transfigures the world, or at least the bread and the wine, which is symbolic of the fruits of the earth. Transfigures the fruits of the earth as being still the fruits of the earth, in the sense that, yes, Christ is still the body, is still the bread and wine. It's not the body. Blood hasn't changed its form at all. It's empirical nature. But it's what he's asked of us is understand even the fucking cockroaches and things we detest about the world, mosquitoes, even those are the body of Christ. And Christ is true food, as he shows St. Peter after his death in a vision. Everything is for your partaking of. Everything is for your pollution. Because that which pollutes you does not defile you. That which cometh into you, that which pollutes you, what goeth into a man, does not defile him, but that which cometh out pollutes a god, defiles a god. He's making humanity the gateway there between God and not God, God and man. Because man is God, so he's limiting infinity. So it's infinity. We can observe God. We are the observers of God, so that God can see himself. It is divine. So he doesn't actually change the nature of the bread and wine, because the bread and wine he's praying is changed, the understanding of it as being changed from just mundane and commonplace to being a miracle, because everything in life is a miracle. Anything exists is a miracle, an aspect of divinity. And in some senses, the world was defiled and full of uncleanliness. Now the world was just another aspect of infinite God, and the transmutation part of this is that he took that taboo of cannibalism and just spit in his face and said, "Go away." Yeah, whoever's gonna stay can stay, but you gotta eat my fresh blood, and that's what happened. John drank the blood first at the cross. He's the only one saved the whole time, and the blood and the water separating. Yeah, there's some sort of biological process of blood and water separating. That means, okay, the person's dead as they start to. Blood and water separating was a symbol of the way in the storytelling, symbolic of he drank the blood as if it was water. And then when you go to the tomb 3 days later, Peter and John and another disciple and Mary Magdalene and Martha, they meet an angel there. Angels are your shadow, manifesting what your conscious wishes. It's when you humbly ask of your shadow, your inner divinity, to manifest something divine that is in your interest, the angels come. That's what an angel is, basically. An urge that you were not consciously in control of. It just suddenly took over to do what needed to be done, and you fucking don't know where you got the strength. Like people picking up a car that has run over someone and just picking it up off them, or just doing impossible feats of humanity. So they took over the guards, basically, because they had adrenaline rush, frenzy, just like, beat up the guards, went to the tomb, and in that manic state, just tore into the flesh of Jesus, ate his body. Like, they remember something that he had said, and they had been trying to get, unconsciously trying to wrap their head around that, and at that point, it's like, this should do it, boom, they ate the body, and that's why the angel said, so when they asked, "Where's the Lord?" the angel said, "The Lord's not here. He is living. He's risen." Because transmutation here is from lower, is also a transfiguration from lower to higher. It's also transmutation because it changes from one species to another. It changes the species of man to being both fully God and fully man. Because now God dwells in us, but now God is us. So God, yeah, it's like I am in you and you are in me, kind of thing. If you eat the flesh of God. So the first real Eucharist happened after God died. Last Supper was just like a reminder, hey, that's what you need to do. And John did it first, and like maybe he had a talk with Peter and whatnot. That's why they went to the tomb. That's how Christ came to the Gentile, because it was added to the Jews, and the Jews, they became both Jews and Gentiles because they went out into the world and they interbred and intermarried and all this other bullshit, and their cultures intermixed and all that. Some went to the Greek embassy. Yeah, so basically that's how that happened. Because the first Eucharist the Jews did really did have the blood of the least of these in the chalice because of what it says in the Beatitudes. That was the literal interpretation to what Jesus was saying. That is appalling to most uninitiated, but when you're initiated, you become more open minded to things like that. You start to understand that there is no real logical basis for a moral inhibition against the consumption of human flesh just because you're human. That doesn't make your flesh sacred. In fact, if it did make it sacred, isn't that even more compulsion to consume it and add it to you? That's the difference. That's how Christ died for all men. Because there's two forms of transmutation. One is reproduction, sexual transmutation. That is one where you add nothing to yourself. In fact, both the mom and the dad take something of themselves and put it into this new thing, make a new thing separate from themselves. It's like adding a new cell to a collective body. Now, this is adding a cell from the collective body to thine own cell. It is when something has gone too complex. Your body does it, actually. Your body can immobilize its own cells. When those cells die, it doesn't just spit the cell material out in the DNA, it repurposes that shit, adds to it with the food that's coming in. So yeah, you cannibalize yourself all the time. Happens in nature all the time. Mother dog cannibalizes her unborn young because she doesn't have enough to feed, to take care. She doesn't have the means to take care of them. That's why she's starving to death or something, and she's not going to be taken term. It's going to kill both her and them. So she cannibalizes her unborn fetuses within herself. And cannibalism is always it's been in everything, every aspect of humanity, or every aspect of eukaryotic life. Actually, is got cannibalistic origins. The prokaryote ate another prokaryote and was digested from the inside out, and that's the origin story of the first eukaryote. There's no other explanation of it that holds water. Cannibalism is sacred because cannibalism is the first cause of evolution. When something has reached its maximum complexity and cannot grow anymore, and evolution stops, it consumes its complexity, adds it to itself, and evolution goes on. That is the mechanism of evolution, is cannibalism. And that was the message of Jesus. It was the normalization of cannibalism. And it went on for several years. That is why Christians were underground for so long. Why they dwelled in the sewers, because taboo. It was taboo to be Christian because, well, they were degenerates, they were deviants, they were eating people, they were frightening, they were scary. And then Christians became mainstream, and they started saying that about the Jews because, well, it's the Jews that taught them to do that. Cannibalism is, even today, a prevalent thing in many, many cultures that exist today. They still practice cannibalism. The Gori Baba is a good example of this because they are pretty. Um, they live in a very poor country, but as far as um, being spiritually in tune to everything and just having an understanding of what is like. We have the Sadhguru up there. The he is he's argued with brilliant men, or had discussions with brilliant men that wanted to argue with him, and just held his own, like neuroscientists, astrophysicists, held his own. He has had no formal education in that regards. It's all something he's come to know spiritually. And his culture, he I don't know too much about his history in regards to whether or not he was at one time a Gori Baba, but I know that he is definitely praises them several times in their walk, and he says, it's not a walk for everybody. Obviously, some are not have not come to that point in their initiation, and if that's you, and you ain't ready to hear this, when you are, you'll remember that you heard it. My words to you now that are being written on your very cellular facets, every facets of your being is hearing what I'm saying and is imprinting itself onto your heart, because that's the magic of words and symbols. That's why I like to use certain words, and I like to keep the definition of something as literal as possible, because